Okay, so we're now moving on to item 7, page 20. Thanks, Leanne.
Hamilton, can you please take your seat?
Sean, will hand over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew, councillors.
Excuse me, councillors, the meeting is underway.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew and councillors. So with this report, I just thought it would be useful to clarify the purpose of today and the decisions that we are seeking today. So the purpose is around identifying changes to year 2 of the 10-year plan budget. And that's with a view to staff preparing the draft budget, which will come back for confirmation to council. So just in terms of the nature of the budget change decisions that we are discussing today, these will come back as a consolidated budget for council to approve on the 21st of May. And we've got the opportunity on the 4th of April, there's another council meeting where if the decision today was to consult on any significant or material items, that's where we'd bring back a consultation document for approval.
So today's instruction is clearly about telling us to go away and prepare the first proposed draft budget.
Correct.
Yep.
Yep. And so just in terms of, there's 3 categories of changes to that 10-year plan that we're looking at today. So the first one are operating adjustments, which is the first significant recommendation. So these are operating budget adjustments which are just existing council decisions and the implications of those for next year's budget. There's a couple of contract items and there's some timing changes relating to Founders Theatre. And then the second category is just around the capital adjustments, and again that's around timing, around moving some projects within the 10-year plan timeframe. And then the third category of changes is proposals, and you'll see there's 4 proposals in the report, and we'll take each of those in turn. And then following that, there's the opportunity for elected members to raise any other proposals that they wish to raise and debate on those. So following the conclusion of that, and we will have our directions in terms of how to prepare the draft budget. Council is also required today to make a decision on whether formal public consultation is required or not. You'll see in the report the staff recommendation is that based on the changes in the budget as it is now, we don't feel there's any significant or material items that require consultation, but you may make a different decision through the course of today. And I think so just in terms of what happens after today, so just to confirm that, so after today there's a council meeting on the 4th of April, and as I said, that's the opportunity where if there is a need to consult, we would bring back the consultation document for approval, and then we would consult during April and bring back the final budget in May.
So the decisions today get baked into a draft budget. Do they have the opportunity to make changes on the 4th of April, General Manager?
Yes, so we will bring back a refreshed budget on the 4th of April, and so there will be some opportunity to make changes then. And also I just want to, before someone else raises it for me, just to note a correction on page 27. On D at the top of the page, the last bullet point, at the end of the bullet point, the formatting has sort of dropped off. So that last bullet point should say that staff are recommending the proposal be reconsidered during the 2021 to 31 10-year plan deliberations, and the significance and engagement policy should have been formatted as a heading for the next section. So on page 27, at the top of the page, D, the last bullet point, so that the whole bullet point should read, due to the scale of the work proposed, the fact it needs to align to an overall redevelopment of the area, and the fact that a central government financial contribution has yet to be determined, staff are recommending the proposal be reconsidered during the 2021 to 31 10-year plan deliberations, full stop. And significance and engagement policy should have been a heading for the next section. I haven't mentioned the briefing.
Sorry? So if required, and if there's other recommendations or motions put forward today that require modelling, we will bring those back to a briefing to show the modelling impact. Is that the intention, Mr. GM?
Yep, so there'll be some budget refinement, but I think we do need to be clear that today we do need to make a decision on any significant items, because the decision to consult or not needs to be made today. So with that said, I'm happy to take questions. Oh, sorry, so just in terms of how we work through the report with your guidance, Chair, is that the first item around the operating adjustments, if we take that item and it's as a whole, then the capital adjustments, take that item as a whole, and then take the proposals one by one, was what the discussion we had with the Chair prior to this.
And can I just remind elected members of the process that last year we came to you all and asked you to put up any motions or thoughts or things that you wanted to be brought into this plan, and that was an opportunity to give staff to work up anything around those at that time. So I trust that you will be respectful of that process, where you were clearly asked at that stage to come forward, and it was explained that it would make it quite difficult at this stage to bring things through, although in saying that there's nothing to stop you bringing things through today. But there was a process to put in place to try and make it as easy for staff to handle those requests at an earlier date, which was last year. Okay, so I'll move A, seconded by the Deputy Mayor.
So are we moving straight into that question?
No, we're on paper A, which is on page 20. And like I say, I've moved it, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Oh, yeah. So I'll just hand over to Leanne first.
Good morning, Councillor. It's just afternoon. It's not really 3 minutes past 8. Councillors, we've worked with the Strategy and Comms GM and with Julie to just slightly recraft the resolutions that were in the report, just really for clarity. The only addition to the wording that isn't a simplification of the wording is point I, which notes that any significant proposals will be reported to the council meeting on the 4th of April. So essentially what that does is lock in a second part of this process, so it can be a little bit iterative, so that staff can work on information for you, and so that you have an opportunity to look at it before you finally sign off.
And can I just add that we've also tried to make it explicit that what you're approving today is for the purposes of preparing the draft budget. So we've just added that, I guess, phrase into the recommendations then.
Process, Howie, I've got a series of motions. You've moved all of this, so I guess my motions are either going to be amendments, or would you take some of your points in separately?
Well, I've got no idea what your points are until they're tabled. I have not been...
No, but I'm asking you about what process you're going to follow.
If I may, I understood, Mayor Andrew, that you said you were moving point A,
No,
receives the report.
B is what I'm moving, sorry. A we will move at the end.
So just B?
B is what I'm moving.
Okay, so we are doing them separately?
Yes.
That's my answer, thanks.
B on page 20.
And B is the operating budget changes that have resulted as a consequence of council decisions. Effectively, what I'd call these loosely housekeeping adjustments. And then we'll get into the substantive, more discretionary items from that point where other councillors can put forward motions and so forth.
Yes, councillor Paula.
Since B is sort of all encompassing, presupposes some level of conversation about the others, why wouldn't we do that at the end and take all the items individually, have good conversation and land comfortably on the ability to support B?
So just to be clear, B is just relating to those operating adjustments, adjust those operating adjustments in the table that's shown there.
Yeah.
So it doesn't incorporate the other proposals, which are we're asking you to debate separately.
Okay, so if we want to talk about any one of those now, on the question list, now is the time.
So, yep, so the table that we're referring to is the impact of council decisions, the indicative contract
Yep.
costs, and the 10-year plan timing corrections. That's what's included in this current motion that's on the
So
board.
that's what you're seeking questions of at this moment. Thank you.
Sean, could you introduce yourself and Tracy for the camera?
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm Sean Hickey, I'm the General Manager of Strategy and Communication, and Tracy Musty.
I'm Tracy Musty, Financial Controller.
Okay, councillor Gary.
So you make questions.
Thank you. Just look, there's a dirty, hoary, great big figure there of $7.4 million in the, on page 20. I'm just struggling to quite figure out the brackets and all that sort of stuff. So that is an increase in revenue by the sounds of it.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and this is as a consequence of?
So moving the capital deferrals that you would have voted on Thursday, last week at the Finance Committee.
In the Finance Committee, yep.
So obviously if we're moving capital projects that has a capital subsidy from NZTA subsidy
So we
associated
delayed
with it,
some. So
all of that goes together. So they'll obviously the capital projects will increase and our revenue will increase next year.
So
it's a timing movement.
there will be an
It's a timing
adjustment. There will be adjustment in the current year's accounts,
Which you voted on
Which you
last
voted
week.
on.
which we
last
did then.
week.
Okay, at
That's
the
right.
Finance Committee. So so we're plucking this out of year ended 2019 and putting it into year ended 2020, which is the year we're now discussing. Yep.
Correct, yes.
Okay, so that's an increase in revenue for this year. Is that right? Sorry, for the
next-
year,
for
for
next
2020,
year, yeah.
2020,
Yeah.
yep, sorry, I'll be quite clear when I say that. Okay, so that's in the, okay, so do we treat those things as capital, as revenue,
Yes,
but we take them out of
the balancing
balancing the books? Okay,
That's
so
right.
this is an accounting thing,
So
not
this
a
is the full profit, if you go,
Yep,
full
okay,
profit and loss
all right,
statement. I
okay.
have to talk about the whole lot, operating and capital.
Okay, so is an adjustment somewhere along in there balancing the books
Correct.
for the year? Okay,
There will be, yes.
thank you, that's cool.
Councillor Angela.
Just on that, I'm just a little bit confused why we would not continue with, why we're moving deferrals from one financial budget into another in an annual plan process. Would we not normally do that in an annual report process when we wash up at the end of that financial year?
We always do both, to be honest.
Do we?
So what we're doing at the moment is alluding you to the fact that obviously there is a whole lot of deferrals coming through from a capital perspective. So we kind of do two bites at it to kind of give you the heads up to say, actually, this is what we're moving as part of this process. So please take it into consideration with everything else that you're doing. I then formally come back to you in June to say, we've actually now decided that this is actually what's really happening, and I formally get you to approve it. The key with this one is because it is such a big chunk of revenue that goes with it, with our new financial strategy, with debt to revenue and things like that, it makes a huge impact. So what we're doing is bringing that to the table today, because you've already voted on it essentially. So these decisions here are things that you as a council have already voted on. So as far as my baseline budget, before we start getting into all of the proposals and anything else, this is kind of what it looks like now.
So, doesn't this skew though the budget, the current financial year's budget and how we're tracking, because we're tracking a considerable surplus.
Yes.
So doesn't doing this practice skew that
So-
unnecessarily?
No, it doesn't. It's separate. But what you will see is obviously that coming out of this year's budget in the next lot of financial reporting.
So this year's budget's forecast will reflect a reduction in revenue from NZTA subsidies.
Of this quantum?
Of
That quantum.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is give, for this financial year, ignoring the annual plan, we're trying to give this a best indication of where we're going to land in this financial year, and we've already had a one go at identifying the revenue associated with deferred capital in the finance committee meeting last week, and then for the end of year when we do our final, well, for April meeting, when we do our final wipe up for June. But when we bring the final budget back to you in June for sign-off, we will make sure that we've captured all of it as accurately as we can, what we've done in previous years. But because it's such a large number, we want to make sure you're aware of it early. It's not skewing anything, it's just making sure we acknowledge the decisions that are already made at finance, that we're going to defer these items and then picking them up now.
It doesn't feel right to me to take out a chunk of revenue from a current planned annual plan and move it at the next possible opportunity, the next annual plan.
Okay,
We're
so-
going to be missing, in this financial year, we're just removing a whole chunk of revenue.
So we will still report a variance in our annual, so when we close this year out, we'll have a variance in our NZTA funding.
Yeah, of
It's
minus.
Of $7.4 million or $7.5 million. And so
Yeah.
we'll report that. What Tracy's going to be doing now is going away and preparing an opening budget position for this
Yeah.
financial year, and this adjustment needs to be made so you know exactly how much debt you've got where you're starting, so that's the first adjustment we're making, and also what our forecast revenue will be for the next financial year, be up by $7.5 million.
Yeah, I
And
get
the annual
that.
plan allows us to make that adjustment.
Yeah. So then if we're taking it out of one budget, putting it into the next financial year, surely it's not a deferral. Because deferrals,
It's due to the deferral of the capital projects. So
Yeah.
no, you're right. And if
Yeah.
it's a standalone revenue item,
Yeah.
it's a timing thing. I'm literally taking revenue out of this year that we said that we were going to get. We're not going to get it because of the capital projects, and we're putting it into next year. So yes, you're right in that sense, but it's because of capital deferrals that we're doing it.
so it's just, we're taking an opportunity to tidy things up? Because there's no financial benefit, is there, of keeping it running as, look, we're not going to, in this financial year, this is going to remain on our deferrals line. We're not going to get it completed by this financial year. It just runs along. We do our annual report. It gets pushed into next year anyway.
Yes.
We're just, so
So
there's no
it's-
material, there's
Yeah,
no
it's because
material.
it's revenue and it's a
Yeah.
material revenue amount that does
Yeah.
affect, our debt to revenue ratios and
Yeah.
all of those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And basically, when we report next year, right, we're going to have an opening starting position that's different. And if we want to report accurately our debt to revenue ratio, it's better than rather keep adding this back as a variance that, hey, look, hey, you remember last year we had this revenue we pushed into this year. It's better to acknowledge it up front and saying, hey, we're baking that into our numbers so that we know we're going to be missing it or gaining it. So it's this way of acknowledging it.
Okay.
Because technically I could wait till the end of the year till you've formally approved all of the deferrals from one year to another with this attached revenue, and then push this through. But so it means pretty much on the 1st of July when we start the year, I'm already out of sync with
Yeah.
your budget because I've got this, this revenue that's coming through.
And we
So
do-
it's just acknowledging that and kind of
Not really
saying,
the- we do it all the time.
I mean, yeah, we actually do it every year. It just happens to be this year in particular, it's quite a large
It's a big
number.
one, yeah,
So
okay.
all the other years I've always done it, there's always been revenue attached to the deferred capital projects. It's just that we obviously have a clearer picture of what that is at the moment, and it happens to be quite a large number attached to it. so.
Yeah, okay. Just on that same page, the increase in cost of cleaning contract, $500,000, is that's a lot of money.
It is.
What's actually happened there? What's driven
We leave
that
it to
increase?
Yeah, so that's coming back to you in a paper in March, and Emily
Okay.
will go through, our facilities manager will go through, there's quite a few reasons why, that figure's coming back at that amount, so do you want to talk about it now, or can we leave that for Emily?
Oh, no, that's
Yeah.
enough information, just
Thank you.
as long as it's coming back.
Bear in
in.
mind that if council doesn't approve that decision in March in terms of that contract, we still have the April meeting to update these numbers. So
Yeah.
this is just a starting point, trying to get as much things into it as possible.
Yeah.
So you're not committing to that contract.
Yeah.
You're only committing to
No.
the number being included in the budget.
I'm just seeking, the reasons why such a considerable increase. Just the 800,000, the decision to remove $809,000 to demolish the Founders Theatre. I just wanted to catch up. I'm going to look at our GM over there. The last resolution that we had was sort of that you were to go away and work with community groups, and I know that you've done a considerable amount of work there. When are we looking at? And of course, I support this coming out until we've made that future decision. But when are we going to have that conversation about the future use of Founders Theatre? I know we've got the West Town Belt going.
Well, through the chair, we have actually already had that conversation. We've had a number of people that did come forward with ideas.
Yeah.
But as you'll recall, none of them really came through with any money to go with their ideas, and so there was really no outcome from that. We had decided to hold pursuing the demolition until things are a bit more advanced with the Waikato Regional Theatre, just to cover ourselves. And whilst things are advancing with the Regional Theatre, they're not quite at that stage yet where we can say to you with certainty it's time to step down. I would have an expectation or an assumption that when we do get closer to coming to you about considering the actual demolition of the theatre, that the alternative community use question will just be simply raised again as a part of that process. But right now, there's nothing that's come forward that's been able to stick.
Okay, thanks, Sean. CE, I indicated to you before, I've got a motion coming, a question raising the process of municipal pool. Oh, it's like magic, you've changed. Deputy CE, I'll probably indicate that I'd raise the same concern around the fact that council hasn't actually had a resolution that said we will demolish the Founders Theatre. We've put money in the budget for it. We haven't, I question that, so I don't know whether that's something that, along with this 800,000, you might want to give some commentary in the draft annual plan to come in March. It's not, do you agree? That wasn't a question.
With Leanne's team and our legal advisors, we've actually had a look at the decision-making process, and we're confident that council, by having passed the budget and the LTP, has actually made that decision. So there's actually a track record there, and we have notified the consent, and obviously it's a separate process. People can now submit on that consent, which is out there around the demolition of it. So I don't know the nature of what your resolution might be.
Oh, sorry, that was the wrong word.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't a resolution. But no, in particular, I was just questioning the founders. But if we, yeah, okay, no, I'll leave it. Thanks.
Councillor James.
We're only asking questions on point B, aren't we, at the moment?
Councillor Mark.
Thank you. I was picking up on the cleaning bill as well there. I'm not sure if Councillor O'Leary is comfortable of sort of saying yes before we know what's happening on that. How can we vote on a over $500,000 increase in costs on cleaning without knowing what or why? Is it prudent? Sorry, I'm not asking you if it's prudent. I guess I'd like to know a little bit more, please.
Yeah, so I guess if it gives you some comfort, you're not approving the contract, you're not approving that goes ahead in this decision today. You're approving that there's a budget, that we prepare the budget, the next draft of the budget on the basis that it does. So if you make I guess a different decision when the matter comes before you, then that will be reflected in the updated budget.
Right. So will we see it, just, because we're going to see so many numbers, will we see that as an increase when it's reported back to us? Or will it just be baked in, just to remind us of it, if you like?
So the budget we're preparing, the budget that's in this report today includes that amount in it.
Right.
If you make when the paper comes to council, and if council makes a different decision on that, then the change would be reflected in that report. You'll see the effect of that change in the report.
Right, so if we agree to this, we will see when it comes back the 539 increase then to
Yes,
monitor.
that's
Thank
right.
you.
Yes.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Councillor Paula?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a couple of quick questions. The reduced revenue from the Transport Centre was, I can't remember, can you just refresh me on why that was there? I think it's the...
Thank you, Evelisa.
Through the chair, I can answer that. So
Thanks.
that was in response to council supporting regional council in terms of the bus services and our provision of reducing the rental income for regional council to support the bus services in terms of consistency of provision of the service for the city, because they were undergoing strikes and things like that in terms of Go Bus. So that was a resolution that came through the Growth and Infrastructure Committee.
Okay, thank you, because I'd forgotten that. So essentially we were making it easier for regional council to carry on their service at the Transport Centre?
It was to support the delivery of the bus services in terms of the ongoing contract with Go Bus and Regional Council. So,
Right, okay, thank you. So, and also my questions were almost identical to Councillor O'Leary in regards to the demolition of the Founders Theatre. Will we have the information we need about potential community projects or uses prior to approving demolition?
Yes, you will.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it. Hang on, no, there was one more. Libraries. So we declined to work in partnership with Waikato District Council over libraries, or at least to have them use our service, which was a loss in revenue. That was so that the boundary changes in the Waikato District could be sought to a relationship with. I wonder how that's going. It was supposed to, I think it was described as a leverage point to get Waikato District Council to look at boundary changes earlier. I wonder how that's going, Mayor Andrew.
Talks have just begun.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Just on the libraries one, obviously talks are ongoing on the other issue, but this is the effect this financial year, coming financial year of that in part. It'll be larger for a following financial year, but it's just this.
It's part this financial year, and this is the full $300,000 effect for the next financial year, the next annual plan.
Right, so that's over, right.
Which was the full amount that they used to pay us. So they'll be paying us nothing, and they'll be getting no service.
Okay, so you just say council 11th of October 2019? Oh, okay, yeah. What, that's ahead. Is that the correct date? Sorry.
So that was the date where council considered a
2019?
18.
Yeah,
okay,
it should be 2018.
okay, that's why I was confused. Now, on the demolition of the Founders Theatre, in my view, it should be, the word should be demolition or repurpose. I am crystal clear, read my lips, that we have parked, as the councillors, we have parked that decision. You know, there's a process, okay? There's a process, a debate to be had by the incoming council, and I'm just wondering if that, just by saying a straight demolition, that is not necessarily representing, and I think that's either in the explanatory notes, we need to give some history of that, or it would be far more accurate to say demolition or repurpose. Now that repurpose could be, and we've already talked about in part, whole, other groups. You see what I'm trying to get at? You know, in other words, we're not talking about just to keep it, but we are talking about some options in there.
I think we can have a look at the wording of that to make it clear.
Yes, look, if I could just add to that, the budget is for the cost of, an estimated cost of demolition. It's not for repurposing the building for any other use. That would have to be determined should there be an option come forward that was to be pursued. But it's not money that's set aside to repurpose the building. In fact, it's simply not enough to repurpose the building to make it safe.
But I'm getting at the fact that I do not want, and read my lips,
Excuse me, Excuse
No.
me, stop. It's question
not
time.
backing you.
It's question time.
Well,
So-
question
so-
time.
Hang on,
Question time. If you
don't
don't,
direct your question at the General Manager or
I
at
will
Sean.
direct it to General Manager. Help me here, because I want to be ironic if I vote against something I've seconded. I want to, a little ironic, I just want to say, make sure that we've got some explanatory notes, because there's an actual physical decision to make around the future of the building, the site. There are a range of options. Now, I get that for safety, you keep a budget allocation for a future year. Okay, I get that, because obviously what we're saying is we're keeping our options open, and we may very well vote to demolish, but we haven't made that decision at this point.
I think, just reiterating what Sean said, so my recollection was that the resolution was a sum of money for the potential demolition of Founders Theatre, if that's what the decision the council made, once we've sorted out all the contractual relationship with the regional theatre, we've worked through the West Town Belt Master Plan, and then should council make that decision. My understanding with the 809,000 wasn't actually to put towards one of the proposals in the EOI proposal, so maybe we could tidy up the wording to reflect the potentialness of that sum of money.
That's it. But yeah. I think that's really important, because I'm predicting that there'll be a discussion to be had. Put it that way.
Yeah, and what you're saying, you don't want the wording to look like council's already made some predetermined decision. Yeah. Okay.
Councillor Mark.
At one home, we don't need to put a resolution to change the word to potential. If you put the word potential in there, that would probably, I would imagine, solve the problem.
Yeah, so what we'll do is Sean and the team will just go away and put in some appropriate wording that, I don't think you need a resolution to that effect. We'll get Leanne to make a note on the minutes.
Good as good. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Angela.
Question, but that was my entire point, was that while I will support removing the money to demolish, there is not a council resolution on the books to demolish either municipal pool or Founders Theatre. Simply putting money into a budget isn't a formal council decision. So that's the email I'm about to send the CEO, because I'm very concerned about the veracity of that type of decision making.
So
yeah.
Can I respond to that? Yeah, so we'll clarify the wording in here. This is simply the budget allocation, which is intended to be the...
And that's a prudent thing to do.
Correct. So I'm not sure what the exact wording was in the 10-year plan resolution in relation to the budget funding. It's meant to be reflective of the same thing and just carrying forward by a year.
I think that should satisfy what all of you are talking about. Are you happy with that, General Manager? Deputy Mayor? Councillor Angela?
Yes.
Okay. Deputy Mayor?
Angela's happy, I'm happy.
Okay. All right.
And then when your email comes about the municipal pool one, then we can respond to that and a bit more fully. Okay.
Okay, we're moving to debate. Okay, we're moving to the vote. So we're voting on B. And we're voting, just to get your wording right, to be sure, it's the wording on the bit of paper that's been distributed.
And also on the board.
The motion is carried unanimously.
So we're now moving to C, which is the best place to be looking at it is on this bit of paper that's been distributed separately. It has the correct wording on it. It's moved by myself, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Councillor Angela.
I have a series of motions for some of these. A series, pardon me, of amendments for some of these. How do you want me to? Oh, sorry, you're doing C. Yeah. Sorry, no, ignore me. Just ignore me.
Okay,
Just-
we're going
just
to
for
the-
that moment.
We're going to the board to vote.
Oh, yeah, defer, okay. Too late.
Sorry, Gary, I've asked for the vote.
Called the vote.
Gary, it's not you're in the next bit.
We're all the next bit.
So we need you to vote, councillor Mallett, to be clear, it's C, the capital increase in capital budget for the purposes of preparing the annual report.
Come on.
Motion is carried unanimously.
So we're now moving to D. I'll ask Andrew to explain this one, please.
Sure. Andrew Parsons, standing in for General Manager Chris Allen. Hey, so this project is simply a fund to allow us to work with NZTA in the Greenwood Kaikatea Drive area. So they've got a project which is not funded at the moment, but it's to effectively connect Southern Links into that southern area of the city. But as part of that project, there'll be impacts on the city network. There's already some congestion, some safety matters there to address at the moment. So this would allow us to participate and work with NZTA and our transport team in a collaborative way to effectively develop a common plan in response to safety and growth needs in the city moving forward. So the plan that's just been distributed is particularly useful. So the NZTA responsibility is the solid red line, which is the state highway. The HCC responsibilities are the white-coloured roads, and so it's particularly important to allow us to integrate and interact with NZTA to come up with a common scheme. So look, I'll pause there. I'm more than happy to take questions if required.
Councillor James.
Okay, with the $150,000 increase for the study, NZ Transport, how much are they putting towards the study? Are they going to do it jointly with us, I take it?
So the intention is, the proposal, this would be a joint study, so this would be the Hamilton City contribution for us to represent our community and our road network needs from a safety perspective. I couldn't give you a figure for the NZTA share because they haven't developed that yet, but it would be at least the similar amount or greater, I would expect. The proposal here is this is not a subsidised amount of money. It's just money to allow us to engage as a city with NZTA and get a good joint outcome in that southwestern corner of the city.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Angela.
Thank you. So, the result of this will be some engineered plans on what a proposal for that area, what treatment for that area will look like? Is that the outcome of this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So a common view, and it could involve some consultation as well. But this fund is just to respond to a critical and emerging safety and a growth need out there. And it allows us to have a seat at the table in those discussions as well.
So it's, yeah.
It won't be physical works, it'll be a common shared plan. And then, of course, there'll be the normal discussions in the future
Who pays
around
for what
design
and-
cost, who pays for what, capital costs,
Okay.
etc.
Just need to clarify, because the word study just confused me a little bit. I thought surely the engineers, this is a lot of money, so they'll get in there and craft up some options for what we want.
I would expect so. I think we might have to come back to council with some more detail on the proposal, but this is a fund. It's operational funding to allow us to sit down and start discussion with NZTA and pull a project together proper in the normal manner.
Yeah, thank you. I've got Mayor Andrew, I've got an amendment to go up on the board, but just a question. Why can't we take this out of our minor improvements to transport network budget, which has got around, how much, 2 million in it? Why can't we, this is 150,000, surely there's capacity in that minor improvement project's budget for this?
So I might pass the detail on that to Eva Lisa, but
Yeah.
The initial observation, that minor improvement fund is a capital fund, and yes, it's a council priority around how that's spent, but this is this project will not create a tangible asset. It's an operating cost that we're trying to address here. It's a study.
So have we never used that budget for anything remotely close to what do we want to do with this area? What could plans look like? Because I'm pretty certain we have.
You may be right. I'm personally not aware of anything beyond the significant work that was done as part of the Southern Links designation in the area. But since then, which is about 2013, since then there's been significant traffic growth on the network. You know, there's been work done back at the Gallagher Drive intersection with signals, and I think there's an emerging critical need to have a common view and common understanding.
I'm not debating the merits of the proposal at all. What I'm debating is you're asking for new money, and I'm saying there's $2 million in a line in the budget every year for minor improvements to transport network, and that's a level of service budget. It's not a capital budget. This is a proposal to increase the level of service. So what I'm saying is, why can't it? I want to know why we can't take the 150,000 out of either this year's minor improvement transport budget or next year's.
I guess that council can do that if council chooses.
Yeah.
It's a priority decision.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Councillor Leo.
Is this in any way hooked in with the Southern Links for, who do I talk to here? Is this in any way hooked in with Southern Links?
Yeah, sorry about that. I was just getting some helpful pointers. Yes, it definitely is part of Southern Links, but not directly. So Southern Links has determined the right strategic network for the future, and in this area, it's State Highway and NZTA responsibility. But there's some peripheral interaction with the city, and the study needs to address that and develop that common view. So it is associated with Southern Links, but not Southern Links directly.
The biggest problem appears to be at the intersection of State Highway 1 and Kaikatea Drive, and also the cross intersection of Duke Street with State Highway number 1.
Yes.
Would you agree that the biggest problem is vehicles attempting to make a right-hand turn?
That's certainly one of a number of issues, and I think the other issue would be if parts of Southern Links were constructed in the future, it could change the performance and the way the whole network operates out there. So the key is to be prepared in advance of any of those issues around having a common plan and a common outcome. So common and agreed with council laws and NZTA. But you're exactly right. I think there are safety issues there now, and there will be other different safety issues in the future.
So really what we're looking at is 150,000 to come up with a suggestion. You turn left in and you turn left out.
No. No, so there could be changes in network hierarchy out there.
Of course there could be.
There's the western end of Kaikatea Drive between the State Highway and Tui Karamira Road that could become quite unattractive as a through route, which is not desirable. So there's a whole raft of matters to consider, and the idea is to pull all of those issues into a common view around walking, cycling, what's best for a community, and so we have a common plan to move forward with.
Got to disagree, but however, thank you.
So, step in, General Manager Andrew. Could you stand up? So, just following up further on what Leo's asking, this is about the corner of Kaikatea Drive and Greenwood Street, is predominantly where that's come from, and the traffic and trucks and buses and industrial land and our neighbours that could come into the city and could be bought online, should there be a way of accessing the state highway properly using NZTA's money, not the city's money? And this is about us using a small amount of money to then activate NZTA to use a whole lot of money for the city's benefit. Is that part of your understanding of what this is about?
There are a number of growth challenges in that area, and this is about being in front of those challenges and being prepared for those challenges. It's not in any way the city taking over an NZTA responsibility for matters on the highway, being the solid red lines, but it's about understanding that broader network performance and what we need to do to facilitate growth and manage safety on the network.
So if a roundabout was to go in on this corner, NZTA would pay for that. What sort of money would a significant roundabout like that cost?
So my uninformed, because I haven't studied this area particularly well, but uninformed starting position would be $5 million-ish, but we know the soil conditions out there are particularly poor, so it could be even double that. So it'd be quite an expensive intersection potentially.
So this is about us putting up $150,000 to get a report done in partnership with the NZTA to possibly get an outcome of a $5 to $10 million benefit to the city?
Potentially, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to debates. Is there any debate?
Well, excuse me, I'm not sure what this stage. We don't have a motion.
So, yeah, I moved it. Deputy Mayor.
Okay, so my apologies, we missed that. And so we'll take Councillor O'Leary as an amendment.
Yeah.
We'll put them both up on the screen.
Budget.
This year is 18.
But we're doing the
In the process here.
Yes.
Because Councillor O'Leary mentioned she had an amendment, but we haven't seen it till this instant. When would we be able to address a question to that new proposal there?
Now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So can I just start here with questions? Mark, are you running Access Hamilton? Does Access Hamilton normally make decisions on what the minor traffic budget and how it gets used? Well, I'll forward my question in through to the Acting General Manager, Andrew. So decisions that are made on the minor traffic budget, minor improvements transport budget, where are those decisions normally made?
Sorry. Just looking at Eva Lisa.
Or Eva Lisa, sorry, Andrew.
So through
General
the Chair,
Manager Eva Lisa.
it's my understanding that the Transport Improvement Program budgets come through the GNI Committee and are reported in the GM report. So the traffic improvement budget is a capital budget, and so the 150,000 is an operational cost because we can't spend that money on design and investigations. So once it transfers into options and we know what we're building, then we can. But take Councillor O'Leary's point in terms of have we used that budget before for operational matters? I'm not sure, and that's something that we need to go back on. But we can prioritise those through the Access Hamilton Task Force to come back through the G&I Committee. Should it be a priority project?
Is the proper process that these would go through that Access Hamilton Committee?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Paula.
Have any consequential impact on some of the other intersections that have been intersection improvements that have been prioritised in the short term? Because I've got my eye on a few, of course, on the east. Not that it's an east versus west discussion, but just want to make sure that something like the corner of Grey and Te Araha doesn't fall off. Because is there money in there that can accommodate this, or does something have to give? And if so, when would we know what gives?
Something would have to give, but I think that would be a matter for the Access Hamilton Task Force and G&I Committee to determine the relative priorities for projects.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Yes, it's obviously unfortunate that Councillor McPherson can't be here, as we're aware he's at a funeral in Napier of a close family friend today. But if I was putting myself into Councillor Dave's shoes, I'm just wanting to get an idea, because you're taking 150,000 away from the minor improvements budget, all right, you know, because you're spending it on this, whereas the current proposal is to have a separate allocation. So I'd really need to be clear before I could support the amendment exactly what's going to go to what is a foregone opportunity. I think that's the question Dave would be asking, as I would. I'm just trying to work out what does this mean in terms of, you know, because obviously we're dealing with, yeah.
So I'm just looking at the sure in terms of the process, so we could do some work and try and answer those questions as staff and come back and through the next engagement with council and the annual plan process and give you a sense of what could drop out based on other priorities for that budget.
Well, probably the question is why, just repeat for me again, and I apologise, why we've put this as a separate item. You know, obviously we've put this as a separate item for a reason, because we wanted to avoid certain other outcomes, I think.
Yeah, so it's been put up as a proposal because it's an operating cost which we have not budgeted for next year. So it's in addition to, it's a change to the 10-year plan. The minor transport improvements, I think, as Evelisa has said, is a capital fund. So that's for different things. I think there's a question around whether we could fund a project like this from that fund and whether there's precedent for that. It sounds like we don't know that yet. But I think the point is that in next year's budget, the ability to essentially suck it up, we're saying, isn't there. So if we funded this project from existing budgets, essentially some other project would have to be sacrificed for the equivalent amount.
And that's the problem through the chair. We don't, if I've got this right, we don't yet know. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not wanting to be obstructive. Yeah, okay, cool.
You just want to make sure that we're not crossing over standard practice or any legislative constraints or anything like that. So we're not trying to be obstructive or anything like that. We just make sure that we give you the right information to make the right decision.
Move on to item E.
Because Councillor Taylor's away and he's chairing the River Plan Task Force, I just wonder if perhaps GM Lance or Natasha could speak to this to give it context.
Sure. Is Natasha here? Yes, thank you, Natasha. Could you introduce this paper, please? Or Lance?
We'll probably play a bit of tag team on this. So this came out of the River Plan Task Force, and there was a lot of discussion around that area between VOTR, the current park, and also the theatre. And if council's going to go be well informed about coming up to the next 10-year plan about what we might do where we've bought those properties and what we might do in that space between VOTR and the theatre, then the staff view was that we strongly recommended that there was a master plan carried out, so that would help better inform the next 10-year plan. So when you were looking at budgets for what to do in that area, obviously it's a critical area of the CBD. You know, we've had a lot of success with the VOTR Central Park. Obviously the theatre's you know, moving along at a fair rate, and there's been a lot of discussion about the connectivity between VOTR and the theatre. Obviously that the area of land in there is reasonably big and could impact on other parts of the CBD around there. So the thought is that there needs to be a good investigation into that prior to council making any financial contributions for projects in that area. So that would actually, the master planning process will actually allow all that investigation to happen, to link it up with other work that's been carried out or is being carried out around the CBD as part of the river plan and other projects, and ensuring that we're well informed. If you cast your minds back when some of the work that Edwards White did, there was a couple of different scenarios, but they were one-page jobs which were put forward in front of council before the LTP. So this is actually about getting more definition around those areas. I might just get Natasha to add anything that I've missed.
You've got most of it. I think I'd just add that part of this is expecting that we will be engaging with affected people and businesses, so that we make sure that the solution that we have is well integrated with the surrounding area, and that we understand how it's going to impact. I think the main thing is here, because we're talking about the CBD and it is a reasonably large portion of that we're changing the use of, we need to understand how to make that space help the rest of the CBD to be a successful space. So the master plan is around understanding that and doing the homework, so that when you come to 10-year planning, you're going into that with more confidence and comfort around the outcomes that we achieve.
Yeah, that's right, you do. Yep. So whatever the amendments. So the motion is moved by myself, seconded by Deputy Mayor Gary. Councillor Gary has a amendment to put up. Seconded by Councillor Leo. So Gary, I'll just get you to, we'll just give us a few minutes and we'll read through that.
If I may, Councillor Mallett, you gave us one relating to eyesight, and but not to Victoria on the River.
It was to do with funding of the master plan. So it's a double-barreled amendment.
Double barrel.
Two birds, one stone. Be efficient.
Two seconds, please.
Maybe one of your team should read it out loud. Sorry. Read it off here, maybe. I'll just ask the democracy manager read the amendment out loud.
Okay. So the amendment is that that council approve for the purpose of preparing the draft 2019-20 annual plan budget, closure of eyesight by the end of the current fiscal year, 30 June 2019. Approve, again, for the purpose of preparing the draft annual plan budget, savings of approximately 500,000 to 600,000 per annum resulting from the closure be reallocated as follows. So in the year ending 30 June 2020, 200,000 to fund the development of the master plan for the proposed river park at 260 to 266 Victoria Street, as set out in attachment 1 of the report. The balance after closing costs to be applied to reducing the budgeted 3.8 rates increase. B, in the year ending 30 June 2021 and all subsequent years in the 2018-28 10-year plan, the full savings of 500,000 to 600,000 be applied to reducing the budgeted 3.8 rates increase. Councillor Mallett appended for clarity the following note. This recommendation is intended to reduce rates for the remaining 9 years of the 2018 2028 10-year plan by approximately 4.5 million to 5.4 million. This figure will very likely be larger because it's not inflation adjusted.
It's delightful, Councillor Guerra, to catch you out on a grammar error. So we'll going to.
Does this become K, or is this an amendment to the Victoria on the River? Because I thought we were discussing Victoria on the River. I thought we'd gone to E. Is that an amendment to E?
It's an amendment to E to fund E. So that's the outcome
that's not
of what,
clear in there. That's
what Councillor Gary is trying to achieve is the funding of E, and of course to also lower rates going forward.
I did not pick that up from that. Sorry. Thank you.
Is it a question or a question of clarity? Because I've got a list of everybody here who wants to.
For GM and Natasha, just on the wording of the motion, it talks about the river plan. Where's the wording there?
The motion or the amendment?
Or either one. Sorry.
I have no idea what I walked back into.
For the proposed river park at 260 to 266 Victoria Street, but am I correct that this master plan is a bigger scope than that? That it doesn't include to the museum, or is it just specifically to that Victoria Street river park?
If I can help you with that, Ryan, that's exactly as per the initial recommendation through
That's
ATSA.
what I'm questioning.
So the
okay, so
the river. This is a river park working group recommendation. My understanding.
Yeah, I was on it, and that's what I'm clarifying.
Okay. So Natasha, I think you were running that group.
So, to clarify, there's a need to do a master plan to address the location between the theatre and Victoria on the River, but obviously that needs to work out how it integrates with what other plans are proposed or exist or are in play. So it would have to think about all the other things that are happening at the same time around there. So while it's within that scope, it also extends beyond that area, if that makes sense. So if we mess with something that's proposed,
but
we need to work through it.
That motion doesn't touch on that interrelationship, that's all. It's quite narrow.
So I've just asked the democracy manager to, as we're working through questions, to sit down and work with you, Gary, just on getting your wording robust and correct, that we can use it. So I'll just let you continue there.
I just have a question on process. We have a report on the eyesight? Oh, coming to council with some information. So that's based on a resolution. How does this fit in with that outstanding resolution? Is it in contrary? Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So can we get an answer on that?
We were just trying to find out, I asked the same question of Sean too around, is there a resolution around the eyesight report coming back?
Yeah.
And we were trying to cast our minds back, you know, because it's been quite a few months, whether there's a resolution or not, and does this try and cross over that resolution, and how does that work under standing orders?
Yeah.
So we haven't got that clarity yet.
Good time for lunch?
Okay, no, I want to continue.
Because you're an idiot.
I need
Some
time
time.
to give you and councillor Mallett some advice about how we proceed on this
Okay.
matter, please.
So we'll move on to F, pending advice back on E and D.
Honestly.
So we've moved on to F, seismic strengthening of the pools.
Just a point of order.
Yep.
Mr Mayor, if the democracy manager is tied up with Gary and that sort of stuff, can we actually give due consideration to F? If we carry straight on now, because you're kind of taking them out of circulation for this discussion.
I want to continue because once we get to lunch, I want us to be able to sort through these issues. Right. And if anything else is going to come up, I would like to sort that over lunch, not come back after lunch and immediately have to stop again. So I'm trying to flush out issues if there are any. Okay. Yeah, for Okay, so moving on to F on page 21. So which general manager was handling this one?
I will on Chris's behalf, but I will hand that through to Mr Paul Gower to speak to in the first instance.
Thank you, Paul.
Let's see what he says when they put the next one. I won't be friendly. I haven't seen it yet.
Paul should have seen it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
Thank you, Paul.
So the proposal relates to a...
Can you explain what you do, Paul, for a job? Why you... Can you explain why you're explaining this to you?
Why do you exist, Mr Gower? It's an existential question.
Particularly to this question.
Yeah, I'll give you this... Okay. So my role is asset strategy, is working across the business with asset managers around how we look after our assets. So part of that has been working with council on the development of our own seismic policy, on how we want to manage seismic risk within council. The policy has been in existence for a couple of years, and we've been going through the assessments that have been part of that policy, and that's been done by the facilities team primarily, and so that's why I'm here. because I was involved with the policy to start with, so and have been since.
Thank you, Paul. So can you go on to explain why you want an extra $1 million?
Okay, so the $1 million is funding provision to carry on with the works that are likely to be coming out of seismic assessments. So we have a briefing with council next month that'll give you a full update of the work that's been happening around seismic assessments. But we can see that there is likely to be some work required in the next 12 months, capital in nature, and so we are being prudent in putting in the budget a provision of $1 million for those works, so we can progress design and works if they're required.
Okay, so I'll move, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Councillor Robb for questions. Councillor Robb. Shall we take your amendment now to get it on the board so that questions relate to that as well?
Yep.
Thank you.
Oh, We're woken over this.
So does this allow for any spend? Is
No.
this an extra? Is this like a,
No, my reason is I don't think it's prudent to put in $1 million of capital funding when we don't have an idea yet of the grand quantum of, it could be $3 or $4 or $5 million, I don't know. So I'm just looking for some prudence and more information before we commit anything to the budget.
I'll second.
we've had a briefing on this.
So, can I ask a question of Paul?
We have had a briefing on this.
Mr. Gower. Hi. Hey, what other information can we bring to a briefing on the 21st of March that will help with this decision? Because Councillor O'Leary's question is to defer putting it into the draft budget until we can come back and work out what the quantum could be. So I suppose the question is, where did the $1 million come from?
Because there's, there's nothing in the report.
Yep.
So the $1 million is around planning costs. So what we can come back with, so detailed planning. What we haven't got at this point is a completed detailed seismic assessment. So until we have a detailed seismic assessment, so what we can come back with is more detail around where we are exactly at with the program.
That's what I'm looking for. And this is, yeah,
but
that's what I'm looking for.
until we have a detailed design
I
that comes off
understand
the
that.
back of that, we do not know.
Yep.
Okay?
Satisfies this information request, Councillor? I just want to work out whether or not we can actually satisfy this, and that would satisfy your query?
It does. And then this still gives us, with whatever information you come back with, it still gives us time to put it into the draft budget.
That's
Yep.
correct.
Yep.
Yep.
Cool.
I was trying to be helpful.
Yeah, thank you. No, you did. Thank you.
Just to be clear, Councillor O'Leary, so what would the effect of that would be that we would then, depending on the outcome of the briefing, we would still bring this for a decision back at the 4th of April?
I just want, it's just a gap. You're asking for $1 million and I don't know what it's for. And I think it's time we had an update on this stuff to understand exactly what the future's going to look like, because I suspect it'll be painful.
So I just want to point out that when you look at F, it says for the purpose of preparing the draft budget. It's not locking it down.
Doesn't
so
matter.
This is about taking it through to the next stage. Councillor Paula.
Chair, I think I was...
Sorry, Rob.
Yeah, I was signalled to ask some questions. And mine follow on perhaps from what we've been discussing. Do we have particular buildings in mind that we would have on a priority list to consume most of that $1 million? You know, do you have a ranking of some buildings around the city that have got some priority for this $1 million to be spent?
Absolutely. So we're working through, and that's what the briefing's about, is to update council around exactly what buildings are going through to a detailed seismic assessment, and why are they going through. What do we understand of them and the particular risks around those?
Right, and so there's an urgency it's a priority list that indicates some buildings that might have a degree of urgency to get that seismic assessment started or planned or done over perhaps other buildings around the city.
Yes, yeah.
And so is the $1 million enough? I mean, you know, or is it too much? I mean, $1 million just seems to be a round figure, but you know, should we be expecting it to be more or less than that $1 million in terms of what work you've already identified, in terms of which buildings they are and potentially what the costs might be?
So the $1 million is what is we are suggesting is required in the next 12 months to keep the program working. So the program moving forward. So the legislation allows a long time frame for the remediation of seismic issues. And it's a discussion for council to have in relation to its policy around how fast it wants to go to remediate remediate any issues that might exist. So it's a policy discussion really for council as to whether or not what level of funding is required over what years.
Okay, but we have previously, and I suspect sometimes in public excluded, we've considered some buildings which the council owns that do need to be remediated reasonably soon, even though they currently comply with the legislation. So I'm expecting that those buildings will be on that list, and there might be reputational urgency around those buildings rather than statutory urgency around getting those buildings appropriately tested and remediated.
Yep, that's correct.
So in this briefing on the 21st, you will be identifying those particular buildings?
Were we talking about specific buildings?
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you. So normally, because earthquake strengthening is something that all councils across the country are facing, yes. And we know that with our ageing infrastructure, we're likely to face some significant costs. So the $1 million just for planning, but that's not part of the renewals and maintenance budget, is it? That's just the planning budget?
So the $1 million is about detailed design. So once we have a seismic assessment which would identify particular structural weaknesses if they exist, then we could spend some money on what the design would actually need to be. And so it is a capital cost. It would be part of any remediation.
So that's like we did once we went in to renew the library, and that found there was some earthquake issues there. That's the money you're saying that would happen next to give a detailed response to the issues you find?
That's correct, and off that, with that money, with the design, we'd have a good estimate of what the cost would be to undertake the remediation. So we could move forward with confidence, knowing what would be required.
So how much did the library detailed analysis cost us? Just out of interest, out of comparative interest.
So this isn't funding for the detailed seismic assessment. Council funded the assessment work through the 10-year plan, so we have got funding to undertake the assessment. This is remedial planning, so it's designed for works.
Okay, I just I'm trying to understand whether the $1 million is a sort of best guess or it's related to something. I presume that when this comes back to council, if this amendment holds, that we will understand a little bit more about the where and why this money needs to be spent.
Yep, so this is consistent with the briefings we've had previously with council about the nature and the scope of the work that's required. So remember, there's a ISA, a DSA requirement. In the 10-year plan, we've assumed a number of DSAs, assumed a number of ISAs. ISA is the initial, D is basically the detailed.
Yeah.
And this is over and above that. What we're saying is once we've identified some buildings that require some remediation, this is the planning for that. And that was also scoped in the briefings as well. There would be some money would be coming back for at some stage. We're now getting more confident as we go on that we will have some spend, and so it's from a prudence perspective we're trying to identify that to close the annual plan. However, we won't actually have the actual number until we've completed all the DSA work and actually identify the extent to which we need to remediate. So, like anything, we now know just based on the work we've done, it's more likely than less likely we have to spend some money on planning. The exact amount is unknown. Like just about every other aspect of the budget, there's a degree of assumption brought to bear. For example, with river slips, we don't include that because we don't know where they're going to happen and we don't know what sort of damage is going to be. This one, we know we can narrow it down to the set of buildings, and based on reasonably good assumptions, we assume there will be some form of remedial work, and we're just trying to be prudent with a degree of conservatism about making sure we've got some form of budget allocation put aside for it.
So you're trying to put some money aside now, not to create a future funding shock?
Yeah, that's a rather direct way of putting it. But yeah, I mean, I'm saying that if in the future there's a high chance we have to spend $1 million, if I don't take it out of the budget now, you may well spend it on something else. Yeah. Pretty much.
I just need to understand more.
And Sean Murray has something to say.
If I may, the $1 million is, and I know Paul's explained it all, but it is to speed the process up, because we know now, without some of the DSOs, but based on the initial seismic assessments, that we are going to have some real big challenges ahead of us. And as a part of the briefing that was due to come to you on the 28th of February, but was bumped to 20th of March, if we can do it now on the 21st of March, I'm sure Chris will be happy with that. Brings it forward a bit. But as a part of that, we were going to be talking to you about the fact that we will need, undoubtedly, to move fast on a number of issues, and that's going to require design solutions from engineers, full-blown costing, so we actually know what we're talking about money-wise. Otherwise, we're just deferring. So the $1 million really helps us keep a little bit ahead of the game as we start presenting to you. And it might well go towards some very fast fixes that might be able to be done quickly, but it's a start that keeps it moving.
Thank you, that helps me. Look, I'm very much for keeping people safe from these risks. It's really hard at this moment to understand whether $1 million is a reasonable amount of money to set aside, and you're saying you feel it is. In fact, are you saying it might even be conservative? Is that what you're saying?
I think if I could answer that, it's not a matter of being conservative, it's a matter, as I said, of having some funding in place so we can start getting the planning and the costings and everything in place so we know where we're going to ultimately be headed.
So just final questions, getting some comparatives of what this costs, or some clearer idea of what this costs elsewhere, that would be helpful, because I'm not quite sure where to land with the figure, and as Councillor O'Leary has said, it's a lot of money, so we want to make sure. I don't want to leave people with nasty surprise, but I want to understand that this is a reasonable sum to attribute to that work.
Yep, so we will do that to our best of our ability. Just bear in mind that each building is unique. You know, they're built at different generations, different eras, have different construction profiles, but we'll do our best to provide that information.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you. My question's more to Sean, actually. Sean, we started off this whole report by suggesting that it's not significant enough to go to public, but I'm just sort of wondering where that threshold is. This is a big spend. We're asking for $1 million more, yeah, I'm just wondering where that threshold is. Should we not be at least consulting with the public on this one, because this is big?
Yes, so that's in the back of the report. I think there's an assessment of the significance of each of the proposals.
Yep.
So if I direct you to page
Attachment 2, right?
37, I think it is.
37, yep.
Sorry, page 39. That's where we have assessed the significance of that proposal. So you can see that based on our significance and engagement policy, the various ratings of significance doesn't trigger the need to consult.
So can you explain to me then, other than colouring in a box orange, what that means?
Yep, so in our significance and engagement policy, there's a number of criteria that we use to assess whether a proposal is significant.
But does it come at is there like a numerical level for that, or is it a nature of the request?
Yep. So for each of those categories, if it meets the criteria for significance on 5 of those categories, it would be deemed to be highly significant.
Yeah.
And if it is below 4, then it would be deemed to have low significance, and then in between is a moderate level.
And sorry, Councillor Bunting, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Firstly, this won't result if we put it in with an increase in rates. So
No,
from
I
a
agree with that.
ratepayer's perspective, it's not going to be a consideration there. B, I don't necessarily, this is going to be one of those things that are black and white. Either we make buildings safe or we don't. So to ask the community, do you think we should make buildings safe? I don't.
Oh, that's an easy one. I guess what I'm saying is, look, we'll just put in the meaning, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but in the endeavour to be transparent with this thing, what worries me is $1 million. We've picked it out of a hat, from what I can gather, with our best knowledge, but it could be anything. The rules could change again, and this is what's caught us out before. So are we setting a precedent by saying we're just rubber stamping it and not saying it's not significant enough to go to the public, and we're saying to the public then, well, that could change to anything and we're just not going to tell you. And so that's why I'm asking what's the numerical threshold with which we go back out to the public and ask them.
So with relation to, if it's relating to the amount of spend, so on page 40,
Yep.
then the capital cost is one of the criteria that we use to judge whether something is significant or not.
Right.
So this has been deemed to be low because the change impact is less than 0.5% of total council assets.
All right.
That's the numerical.
That's
the numerical assessment of significance as it relates to the cost.
I see. So to become medium, it needs to be 28 million. Is that right? I'm just following your capital cost. Is that right? Or have I got my?
So it would need to be 2.8.
2.8 million. Okay, thank you. That's answering the question. So anything greater than 2.8 becomes high significance. So at what point, is it only when it's of high significance, do we go back to the public to ask or to consult with them about it?
So where something ticks the high significance boxes in 5 of these categories, then we would consult.
In 5 of those categories? Okay. Because I'm just suggesting that that even if it went up to 10 million, it would go high in this one, but it wouldn't tick 4 other boxes. So I'm kind of wondering if and we're not asking for approval because you're right, everyone's going to want their buildings earthquake safe, but at which point do we say, let's flag it, let's demolish them because they're not going to be safe?
But okay, so then there's a different decision.
Yeah.
Critique, right? So I can use the example of, I'm going to go to one statement. So the significance policy is about to what extent do we believe something will actually change the perception of the community on the level of service they're going to receive, right? And so it significantly impacts them. So this one in itself in a blanket position doesn't necessarily do that.
Yeah.
It's also a mechanism to ensure that council has a degree of delegated authority from the community to get on and do things. And if we set it too low, every time you make a decision on it, not even the annual plan phase, if you set it really low, you might approve transfer of budgets or something like that, you're going to have to go to the community and consult. So it's about what's fair and reasonable. So that's the first part.
Yeah.
On the second part, using Founders Theatre, for example, I closed it, I couldn't demolish it. And to demolish it, I'd have to go to the community and ask that question. I might be able to go to the community and say, hey, I want $1 million to remediate. Oh, no, so without going to the community, go, there's $1 million to remediate it. I don't have to get permission for that. But there's a separate aspect before I do that $1 million is what are the various options. And if one of those options significantly impacts on the community, and so, for example, if part of this work, when we do the detailed assessment, we do the planning, it comes out to remediate a building, it's $10 million and the building's only worth 2, we'll bring a report back to council saying, like, we've got 2 options here, spend $10 million, which may or may not identify significance, but the building itself may be a significant asset or something we consider important to the community, we will consult on it. Right. So this doesn't preclude us from consulting on that expenditure at a later stage. We just don't have all that information yet to make that call. And so what we're saying, to be prudent, let's put aside some money. And to be fair, $1 million is a large amount of money, but it's not large in the context of our 10-year plan, it's not large in the context of our capital program.
Yeah, and that's
we have to be prudent with how we manage it. I'm not questioning that, but the extent is we have faith in this cohort of individuals to manage the prudence up to a certain point, and then beyond that seek community advice. So we don't believe it meets that threshold yet.
Thank you. So what and you've largely answered my question. Thank you. What I was trying to find clarity on, Mr. Mayor, was just what red lights go on. At what point does the red light go on for me to ask you those questions of significance? So you give me an idea of perspective. So I appreciate it.
Well, you can ask that question at any stage, Councillor.
Yeah.
And we'll record this question response and play it back to you.
Thanks.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. In the initial recommendation, it talked about enable a response to findings from seismic from the seismic assessment of council buildings. So there is two steps. There's actually looking at it and finding out what's wrong, and then this is talking about $1 million to respond to that. So how are we going to respond to those things? And that would be, do we bowl it over? Do we rebuild it? But it's still planning work as opposed to putting steel bands around buildings to hold them up and that sort of stuff. Is that right? And if we don't do this, give you $1 million in the budget, it'll come on a random's the wrong word. You'll be coming to us with, whoops, we have found a problem. $500,000 worth of work needs to be done. It'll have to be go through a risks and opportunities type scenario or something like that.
Yes, right? You're correct. So what we're trying to do is just protect a degree of equity in our balance sheet, so when this does arise, we're making you make the decision now rather than making a decision of choice later on down the track.
Okay, so what this will do though is put another $1 million into the rates. Rates will go up.
We can do this. This basically, we can't answer that question completely, but we're assuming we can meet it within current capacity until we come back to the next meeting when we've modelled everything up. So
you're not asking for whatever the rates happen to be at the moment. We want another $1 million to be put, and it's a miscellaneous, it's a contingency, it's not an absolute spend. So you're not asking for that?
No.
So this will have no impact on rates?
No, this is, at this point in time, we're asking for consideration of these proposals for us to go away and prepare the draft budget. Once we've locked everything in, including those moving parts that David mentioned earlier that he's yet to nut down, we'll have an assessment of what this looks like. And then we bring it back to the next stage for you guys, for the elected members to consider what that looks like as a view. My goal is to make sure that all this stuff all fits.
Yeah.
And then bring it back. If it doesn't fit, there'll be an earlier conversation with the council about what doesn't fit and what some options are to make it fit.
Okay, so we've already got a 3.8% baked in the cake and subject to anything, we can make a decision. You're saying this can be done within the 3.8?
I'm saying that at the moment, the goal is yes, but we need to do the numbers to confirm that, absolutely.
Okay. So if it's baked in the cake already, shouldn't this also come with, and we will pay for it by reducing this spend?
Sorry, Councillor.
So you're asking for another $1 million?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, sorry, I thought Tracy had just given you the answer, and I don't know what she said.
So just to kind of carry on from what Richard was saying, remember this is just where what we're trying to do is form the basis of the budget today.
Yep.
So there's still a whole lot of moving parts and there's still some decisions that council needs to make between now and May. So until we get all of that, then we're not actually going to know what that looks like. But to Richard's point, where at the end of the day, the 3.8% is still what we're working within.
But just remember, and you know this as well as I do, we're working in the second column of the 10-year plan,
yes.
And we've made some adjustments to that first thing we did today,
That's right, yes.
And then everything else we're doing now is an adjustment to that, is a proposed adjustment to that column.
Yes.
And I'm just saying that if this is an adjustment to the second year in those 10 years column, where's the quid pro quo for the $1 million?
I.e., is this going to push us into a deficit position, for example, Councillor Miller?
Yeah, or it's either it must either increase our deficit, or someone's coming up with an idea where there's another $1 million you can save, which is what I did with my thing when I,
there's a whole lot, to Tracy's point, there's a whole lot of moving parts still.
But there aren't moving, sorry to be rude, but there aren't moving parts. There is a column there. We've adjusted that column for things we know, and now we're going to adjust that column for things. You're asking us if you can adjust those columns for some things. There are no moving things. There will be tomorrow, because things will change tomorrow, but at the moment there's nothing moving.
Okay, so at this point in time, there is that $1 million is a plus to costs.
Yeah.
Right? And on the face of it, we'll probably say that may well tip us into a deficit position at this point in time.
Yeah.
However, we're still yet to finalise our depreciation numbers, our inflation adjustments.
Okay, all other things being equal.
Yeah, but that's like taking half a position, because we know, and already indicated this morning, that we already know that the NZTA subsidy is an estimate at this point in time. It will change when we finish our final deferred capital number. And we already know there's a discussion coming up, depending on where the resolution goes today, but there's a discussion coming up on eyesight, there's a discussion coming up on parking. There's all these outstanding matters. For you to consider this to be a complete picture at this point in time is not the best way to progress. All we're asking for is because we're not bringing separate reports back on every single one of these items, we're bringing one big report back to get it included so that we can go away with some confidence and know what to include. That's all we're asking for. Is do you believe it's prudent to include this amount? We'll give you on what date we come back with the something of April? 4th of April. 4th of April. All the moving parts pinned down based on all the decisions council's made, all the assumptions around inflation, depreciation, all these adjustments, and then you can have a proper go at it in terms of, does it put us in deficit? What do we do? What do we cut?
So just to be clear, and I'm going to use that term again, all other things being equal, this will be, this will increase our deficit or reduce our surplus by $1 million, all other things being equal?
Yes,
okay.
That's correct.
And there are other floating things around, and
that's correct. That's a true statement.
Right. Thank you.
If I can be helpful.
Because it doesn't come with a proposal to fund itself from somewhere else.
No, so,
Yes.
so all the changes that are proposed in the budget as it is now are what's included in the report. And so the financial graphs and the debt to revenue and the balancing the books graphs on pages 25, 26, they incorporate all of the changes which are proposed in this report. So including those operating adjustments which we've resolved earlier, including the $1 million for the seismic, etc. And so if you can see that as things currently stand, the forecast balancing the books position is slightly favourable to what year 2 of the 10-year plan had forecast. So as things stand, the sum total of all of these changes do not require us to increase rates beyond 3.8%.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Just going back to the amendment, I mean, basically, this proposal is you've baked in a quantum and you go from here. What's the impact of the amendment? I mean, it's unbaked.
What we're doing is today, if the motion goes through, we're going to prepare a budget with $1 million in. Then we come to a briefing regardless, and we have the conversation. We can still bring that briefing forward without the amendment. Then in April, if council doesn't believe that we've actually robustly put that $1 million in, it goes up or down. Or based on the amendment, we do all that after the meeting in April. It's really neither here nor there. Just helps us if it ultimately ends up, it helps us do the modelling.
What's helpful to you?
Putting the $1 million in up front.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll break now for lunch. Pending over lunch, Evelisa will come back to us. Gary, you'll work with Democracy on your wording, and we'll come back from lunch at 1:25. 2.